Welcome, artists, to the Principles of Design. We are talking about pattern today. Pattern is a repetition of elements, or we can call this a motif in our works of art. It's also the combination of elements in any recognizable organization. So here we see with Rene Magritte's painting this repetition of guys in bowler hats and suits either rising up or falling down from the sky. We're not never sure which. We always talk about it as a class, but never sure which. There's not just the repetition of these men, big, medium size, and small. There's also the repetition of windows in this painting. There is the repetition of the red on the roof, the beige on the walls of the building, the whites, what look like crosses in the windows, which is just the window panes. But there's the repetition of gutters. There's lots and lots of different types of repetition going on in this painting. And so these are simple forms of repetition. We're going to talk about slightly more complex ones as we go through this PowerPoint. So let's move on with that as I erase my face. Okay, so here we have a couple more works of art, one by Mary Cassatt. You see the pattern on her dress here. And this pattern is very recognizable. It's repeating, but because she's sitting down and because her dress bends and folds, the pattern almost is, it doesn't look the same to our eye. Now we know that it is the same. If you held up the cloth, it would all just be this repeating pattern, but because she's sitting down, it's folded and bent, and right here, if you look, you can see there's a crease there, and it kind of messes with the pattern a little bit. And that's okay, because we know in our minds that there's a pattern there. But if you look in the background, you have these leaves, which is wallpaper, and just like on a tree, the leaves repeat, but they don't repeat in an exact pattern. It's not like boom, 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 boom. It's random. And so that's what we're seeing here is this random pattern of leaves, and the leaves even have different colors to them. They're even, if you look closely, they're very oddly shaped, and that's a very realistic view of what leaves might look like. And so there's still a pattern, but it's not a regular pattern, it's an irregular pattern. Again, if we look at this painting by Aubrey, I always want to say Audrey, but it's Aubrey Beardsley, of the peacock skirt. The repetition that's going on here really mostly is this shape of like this half moon shape, or it looks like a fingernail, or it's meant to represent the feathers on a peacock because they have this type of pattern. But again, it's not a regular pattern, it's an irregular pattern that repeats, but there's clearly a pattern. So here are some different types of pattern. There's a grid pattern here where you see, if you look closely, you can see these bunnies right here, but they've repeated. Here they're facing each other, and then here again they're facing each other. And then you have these two birds up here. They're facing away, and then again they're facing away from each other. There's a leaf. Here's the leaf repeated. This isn't the easiest pattern to see where it repeats, but if you look right up through the middle and right under the rabbit's feet, I believe that's where the pattern repeats, and it's on a grid. So if you think of a piece of grid paper, it's just a bunch of squares. Well, that's what happens here, that those squares just will continue to repeat over and over again. If we could see the whole thing, you'd see down here, there'd be another set of rabbits, and so on and so forth. Then down here you have a radial pattern, which simply means it repeats around a circle. Now, if you remember when we talked about balance, one of the forms of balance was radial balance. And so that's what's going on here. There's radial balance, but that radial balance is in a pattern. You can have radial balance without a pattern, but you can't, you need a pattern for it to be radial pattern. So That's what you're seeing here. And it's not just the pattern of the lizards that we see, but the way that they're colored is patterned over and over the same way. You have, white, orange, white, orange, white, orange, surrounded by a dark brown lizard. Okay, so that just repeats over and over again. Then up here we have this Vasily Kandinsky painting where it's an irregular pattern. So the circles are not in any sort of order, but you can tell that it's a pattern because there are circles. That's what he's using over and over again, circles. And so we see the pattern of circles even though they're not repeated in any organized way per se. What is organized is the use of circles. I know that sounds a little confusing, but it's really not. Just keep in mind that you can use a pattern by repeating a certain element of art without there being any organization to it. So this could be, we could also have circles, squares, triangles, rectangles, rhombuses. We could have all kinds of crazy shapes in here. But if you use 3 colors on those shapes, like red, yellow, and blue, if you repeated the colors over and over again, you might not have a repetition or a pattern of shapes, but you do have a pattern of color. And so that's where it gets a little bit more abstract. And so as an artist, you need to recognize that, well, I can use pattern, and pattern will help me have unity in my work of art, but it doesn't have to be an exact pattern. It can be very irregular. So that's something you can apply this week as you work on your sketchbook. And then lastly, we have this half drop pattern, which is, you have something on the top left, you have something on the bottom right that repeats, and then you have something on the top right and the bottom left, and those repeat, and that's the way they repeat. It's not like, I don't know what this thing is right here. I think it's a candlestick. So you don't have candlestick, candlestick, candlestick. You have candlestick, dress, candlestick, dress, candlestick, dress. And then on the second line, it's dress, candlestick, dress, candlestick, dress, candlestick. So you see there's that, it's a half pattern. That's why it's called a half drop pattern. So for your sketchbook this week, you have freedom to choose your subject matter. But what I want to caution you about is, do not turn into me a square, circle, square, circle, square, circle. Your whole page is covered in squares and circles, and they're colored yellow, blue, yellow, blue, yellow, blue. Do not turn in something that basic. That's something you would do in elementary school. Don't think I'm going to give you credit for it in high school. I want you to think of this idea of pattern in a creative and complex way. Now, does it have to be this awesome, amazing finished work of art? No, but it does need to be something that shows a high school level thought process. And so I have great expectations for you guys. And remember, you are free. If you love this work of art in the background by Rene Magritte, you are free to use that work of art and copy something like that. You can look up famous works of art that show pattern. And if you find something you love, then by all means, copy that work of art and submit the actual work of art with your work of art and say, Mr. Jancart, I use this work of art. I really like the pattern in it, and I wanted to do it myself. Or you can base your work of art off another work of art. That's absolutely fine. Just make sure you let me know. I don't mind you working off of another artist as long as you're telling me I was inspired by someone else's artwork. That's artists. We as artists do that all the time, so we learn that way. Just let me know. So I look forward to seeing your work and how you use pattern. Have fun and happy drawing.